can murder a liberator, but you can't murder liberation. You can murder a revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't murder freedom.
All right, you're tapped in. Let's get right to it. We're going to talk about Ibrahim Traore again. Like, this guy is making moves that the West wants us not to see, understand, and or support. He's making progress, and we mean real progress in real time. All right, let's just get into what's happening in West Africa right now. In spite of how France, the Western world, the United States sees the situation, it's very important, again, that we understand both sides of what's taking place in the Sahel. There's their side, and there is the side of the Sahel, what's actually happening on the ground. All right. Now, because we're bringing it up because we think that it is bigger than most people realize. So back in January 2025, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, the three nations of the Alliance of Sahel States, the AES, made history. They actually did this. And there was some coverage, but let's be honest, there was not coverage enough to give the full scope of what was taking place. All right, let's be real about that. They formally walked away from ECOWAS, and that is this African Union thing they got over there. You know, like the European Union has theirs, and you know other blocks from different countries have theirs. ECOWAS is the one that resides or is the main a block of African nations in Africa. But when they walked away, when they formally walked away, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, it created pandemonium. You know, there was chaos and havoc everywhere. No one understood why they would do such a thing. And in fact, for a lot of those on the outside looking in, said that this was the beginning of ECOWAS's demise, because ECOWAS had been in place for a while now, for a very long time, actually. And there are African countries, as much governments as much as people, who say they've done absolutely nothing of any substance for as long as they've been in place. You know, so that was I think the word of that day was ECOWAS is finally falling apart, or it's crumbling, something to that respect. But they are the regional bloc that's operated for decades, like I said, as functionality, an extension of Western, all right, and French interest in the region. So in other words, they're just a puppet organization. And this is something France and the West built and say, here, this is what you guys should become, ECOWAS. All right. That wasn't a small move, though. All right. That was not a small move. That was like three sovereign nations saying all at once, if you will, we're done letting outside powers dictate our regional politics, our lives, our countries. And now, so the ripple effect is spreading. And that's putting it mildly. That's putting it really mildly. Togo is the most serious candidate to potentially join next. Togo. Now, if you think back some months back, they were saying Togo was totally against any of that AES stuff, and they weren't having it, and you know, so forth and so on. However, it seems that Togo is in line potentially to become the next partner of the AES. And I need to make a correction right quick while I'm able. It's on my mind. Chad is not a partner of the AES, nor is Ghana. All right. So the fourth member state would likely be, I don't want to say there's some certainty to it, but the talks are in effect. That would be Togo. Togo is the most serious candidate to potentially join next, seriously speaking. Now, their president has openly reaffirmed his commitment to deepening ties with the AES. And it makes sense. The AES trio is landlocked. The Togo's port at Lomé, gives them direct access to the sea, something they've needed since tensions flared with Ivory Coast and Benin. All right. Now, Ghana and Benin are also, being named by regional analysts as countries where the AES membership talk is real. All right, they're just in talks. There's nothing in concrete yet. Even if there's nothing finalized, they are having talks. Now, I want to be clear here. All right, I just want to be clear here because accuracy matters. Accuracy matters. All right, Ghana hasn't applied to join, like I just corrected. In fact, Ghana's taking the opposite position, officially recognizing the AES while actually encouraging them to come back to ECOWAS. So, okay, yeah, the AES exists, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, but you know what? Come on back to ECOWAS. This is where you're supposed to be. This is Ghana's position, all right? So that's diplomacy for you, all right? And not defection, that's all that is. But it still shows how seriously the AES is being taken on the continent now. And again, the influence of the AES is not just in the Sahel states in the West. It's all the way down to South Africa, East Africa. Everyone is talking about the AES and the changes they've made for themselves. They're talking about it so much so that a lot of these countries are now beginning to take mineral and mine ownership over colonizers, over those who have control of those mines and minerals, outsiders, basically, the West, France, whoever, all right? They're taking note. They are taking note. Now, Senegal and Chad are showing what analysts are calling a soft position, all right? Warming relationships, solidarity, without full membership talk. So they're bonding. They're bonding. They're trying to bring it together. They're trying to figure out how they can fit in or something of that nature, all right? But yet they are bonding. And beyond formal AES membership altogether, we're seeing something even bigger. We're seeing something even bigger occurring, all right? And again, it's astonishing, and it's a good feel to it if you really get to the bottom of what's happening, what's transpiring, what's taking place, all right? So, some are calling what we see taking place, again, in Africa, based upon the AES, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. Some people are calling this the Traore effect. I think that's the name of it, the Traore effect, all right? Countries like South Africa, Botswana, and the DRC, Democratic Republic of the Congos, are pursuing their own resource nationalism, all right? Taking back control of their mining sectors, renegotiating deals that for generations have favored foreign corporations over their own people, all right? That's Traore's blueprint showing up in nations that aren't even part of the AES. That's its reach. It's spilling over. And this is a threat to who? The West, of course, to France, United States, UK, the EU. This is a threat. What that threat represents is that if this continues, then they lose access to resources, minerals, all kinds of things that they took for granted, with very little compensation in return. You know what I mean? This is what they're worried about. They're going to lose that cash cow, so to speak. Now, I do want to address something directly because it's not out there, right? You may have seen certain headlines claiming Botswana is joining the AES, all right? That they're joining AES, outright. They're not. I looked into that, and that claim traces back to just sensationalized social media content and people, using that. It's clickbait. Basically, it's clickbait. All right, not any confirmed government statements or AES communique has been put out there. Botswana remains its own sovereign democracy, pursuing its own path, but it is part of this broader wave of African nations rethinking who actually benefits from their resources. All right. So what we're witnessing isn't just one country's revolution. What we're witnessing is like a continental shift. The whole continent is beginning to shift in the favor of those countries on that continent, not outsiders, not the West, not France, not the EU, none of that. All right. And speaking of France, you have to know that along with, the rest of the old colonial order is watching. France and others, they are watching this. And like I said, man, this is an actual threat. This is an actual threat to what they would call their national interest. And when anytime, you see these European countries, France especially, United States and others, get to talking about their country's national interest and something not going the way that they had planned and mapped out, years ago, is starting to have an adverse effect, you better be ready for whatever's coming down the pipes, because you got to know that they're trying to dream up something to get back control of that region, of that continent, because there is a continental shift occurring. All right. And again, that's in terms of sovereignty, mineral rights, resource rights, things of that nature. All right. So yeah, France and others are watching this model, let's say, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, that they can't control anymore. But not only that, they can't even control it in such a way that where they can stop it from spreading. What Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are doing, that cat's out of the bag. There's nothing France or anyone else, the EU, United States, the UK, can do about any of that. That's done. So how do they stop the bleeding? That's our question. We like to know how they are going to stop the bleeding. There's something to look forward to, all right? That's something that we think sooner rather than later we'll have a full picture of, all right? Now, just to help me out in terms of context, I have a clip. As always, I want to show you guys this clip. As usual as well, please like, share, follow, comment, and subscribe. You are tapped in. This is the Art of Political Discourse. We appreciate greatly your participation and viewership. So help us out, man, with that like button, that share button, and that subscribe button, all right? That being said, let's jump into this clip. I find it very interesting that he's been able to go this long without any real consequence just yet. He's saying things that haven't been heard in decades. And this is a shock, or this is coming as a shock to a lot of outsiders, Westerners particularly. All right. That being said, let's get to this clip, let you guys get an understanding of what's really happening in that region. This is courtesy of Talk of Africa 360. Okay. I thought the clip was insightful because it has Traore talking, but at the same time, it's being translated from French to English. And again, we thank Talk of Africa 360 for the use of this.
And the war imposed on us today, we must learn lessons from this war. If one lesson is learned, it is that we must be strong. Be strong. Strong so future generations avoid what we experience. This terrorism has thrived and lasted a long time due to the weakness of our armies. And today we dream of a strong indigenous army rooted.
Now, he's speaking about JNIM, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, all these so-called jihadists, all these terrorists. They come from all over the world to fight against these African countries in the Sahel, those three especially, but there are other countries where they carry on this terrorism or whatnot. In spite of this, that war that they're faced with in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, they're still accomplishing great things. And I think that's where most of the shock comes from. And that shock is coming from those in the West who thought that supporting so-called terrorists or jihadists against the establishing of a government outside the influence and force of Western powers, to have been able to fight against this and still build the country is a shock to the West. No matter how much money they're throwing into this thing, and do know that it's being alleged that they not only provide cash, money, they provide logistics and weapons. All right. And most of these guys are foreigners, these so-called jihadists, these terrorists, whatever they're being told that what they're doing is for the sake of Islam, for Sharia law and all these things, it's being done to establish a caliphate. And really, that's just on the face of it. They may actually think these terrorists, but those who are supplying them, supporting them, giving them the logistics they need to do these surprise attacks or whatnot, that's not their agenda. Their agenda is only to manipulate and utilize these foot soldiers, so to speak, as a means to get in and destabilize the AES. That's it. What they need is for those three countries to be destabilized so that they could show the world or the United Nations a reason or an excuse as to why they need to go in there and help these people, because they don't know what they're doing. Imagine that, all right?
In these values. That is the reason why this project you see here for the new academy was initiated. And a few months ago, the buildings went up to accommodate more students.
Ibrahim Traore understands something most leaders won't admit, that a nation that can't defend itself is not truly free. Thousands of young Burkina-based students are being trained on how to handle a weapon, how to set it, how to respond to any unexpected war. These are students, teenagers, not up to 20 years of age, being trained today so they're ready for tomorrow.
Do y'all see this? They blindfold them, these trainees, and these look like all women, and they have them break down the AK-47. Blindfolded. I would like to, I'm going to start it again. I'm hoping that they have them reassemble it blindfolded.
This is preparation. This is a generation raised to never depend on foreign soldiers to keep them safe. This is what real sovereignty looks like. While other leaders chase summits and photo ops, Traore is busy building his country. This is Africa raising a generation that fears no one, a generation that won't wait for outsiders to save them. From Sankara to Traore, Burkina Faso keeps proving that real freedom is trained, not given. If you support what Ibrahim Traore is building, drop a comment and follow for more.
In January 1961, a man was taken out of prison in the middle of the night. He was beaten, loaded onto a plane, and shot.
I saved 50% of my car insurance premium with this.
They don't want us to know that there's an easy way to lower your car insurance costs. What you do is you go to simplify.com and it takes 2
Then his body was cut into pieces and dissolved in sulfuric acid. There is no grave. There's no burial site. There's nothing.
I have to rewind it just for a few seconds. I have to see this.
Body was cut into pieces.
Oh my God, they didn't just shoot him, did they?
The night he was beaten, loaded onto a plane, and shot. Then his body was cut into pieces and dissolved in sulfuric acid. There is no grave. There's no burial site. There's nothing left of him except a gold-crowned tooth, which a Belgian police officer kept as a trophy and took home to Brussels. His name was Patrice Emery Lumumba. He was 35 years old, and less than 7 months before they killed him, he was the democratically elected Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is his story, and I need you to understand something before we go any further. This was not ancient history. This was 1961. The people who ordered this, their names are in declassified CIA documents you can read today. So
there we go. It stands to reason then that Ibrahim Traore, Goita of Mali, and Tijani of Nigeria, they're all in danger. This is the CIA. This is probably MI6. This is, France's spy organization, as well as Mossad, at work. At work. Again, we're talking about the West and their, what they call natural interest. It's not in their natural interest, or excuse me, their nation's interest to allow these brothers to live, to thrive, to bring sovereignty and independence to their countries. It does not serve the West to allow that to exist. And this is what they will result to. This is what they've been resulting to stop such a transition and a progression that serves the people on the continent of Africa. Sad work, man.
the question isn't just what happened to Patrice Lumumba. The question is, why did the most powerful governments on earth need a 35-year-old African man to disappear so badly that they dissolved him in acid and kept a tooth? Sometimes history reminds you of what it truly cost Africa to be free. Guinea 1958 is that story. Under President Ahmed Sékou Touré, Guinea became the first Francophone African country to say no to France. And France made sure every colony on the continent watched what happened to them for it. It is 1958. Independence movements are growing across the continent, and France can feel it sleeping. So Charles de Gaulle, the French president, creates something called the French Community. Colonies will get limited self-governance, but France will keep control of their defense, foreign policy, and economy. All they have to do is to vote yes. The idea, give them a feeling of freedom without actually giving them freedom. And de Gaulle assumes every colony will say yes. And that assumption is not unreasonable. France has spent decades not just controlling Africa, but making Africans feel French. By 1958, most colonies have been so shaped by French language, culture, and identity that voting yes feels natural. Sékou Touré feels it differently. Before the referendum, de Gaulle visits Guinea in person. Touré is 36 years old, a union organizer who has spent his life fighting for Guinean workers. He stands in front of de Gaulle and says these words: "We prefer poverty in freedom to riches in slavery." On September 28, 1958, Guineans vote and 95% say no to France. On October 2nd, 1958, Guinea becomes the first Francophone African country to claim full independence. So France responds by pulling out over 4,000 people, doctors, teachers, engineers, civil servants, all gone within 2 months. And this is where you see exactly who France is. On the way out, they unscrew light bulbs from government buildings and take them. They burn medicines in hospital rather than leave them behind. They destroy the sewage infrastructure plans for Conakry, the capital, so Guinea cannot even run its own city. They smash equipment, burn books, and demolish buildings. French commentators call it a divorce without alimony. Guinea is left with no infrastructure, no transition plan, and no support. The educated class flees the country by thousands. The country that chose freedom descends into poverty and repression. But in 1960, the wave of African independence comes anyway. Country after country declares independence. What France tried to prevent by making an example of Guinea happens regardless. History records that Guinea paid for being first. They lost their doctors, their teachers, their medicines, their infrastructure, and decades of economic stability. Guinea paid that price so the door to independence in Francophone Africa could open. In 1958, freedom was not given, it was taken, and Guinea took it first. In 1966, Guinea's president Ahmed Sékou Touré did something almost unimaginable. After Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah was overthrown in a military coup while abroad, Touré welcomed him into exile and named him honorary co-president of Guinea. That single act tells you almost everything you need to know about Ahmed Sékou Touré. He was a leader who believed Africa's liberation was bigger than national borders, a man who saw the struggle against colonialism as a continental cause rather than a national one. But to understand why Touré made that decision, you first have to understand how he became one of Africa's most influential leaders. Touré was born on January 9th, 1922 in Farana, in what was then French Guinea. He grew up under colonial rule and carried the legacy of resistance in his blood. His great-grandfather was Samori Touré, the legendary military leader who fought French expansion across West Africa for nearly 3 decades. As a young man, Touré began as a trade union organizer. Through strikes, political mobilization, and grassroots organizing, he became one of the most influential labor leaders in French West Africa. His growing influence helped transform the Democratic Party of Guinea into a political movement. By the 1950s, anti-colonial sentiment was sweeping across Africa, and Touré had emerged as one of the leading voices demanding an end to French rule. Then came the moment that would define his place in history. In 1958, French President Charles de Gaulle proposed the French community an arrangement that would grant limited self-government while keeping African territories tied to France. Most French African territories voted yes. Ahmed Sékou Touré urged Guinea to vote no. During de Gaulle's visit to Conakry, Touré delivered a statement that would become one of the most famous declarations of African independence. We prefer freedom in poverty to riches in slavery. The message resonated across Guinea. On September 28, 1958, Guineans overwhelmingly rejected the French community. Just days later, on October 2nd, Guinea became the first French-speaking African colony to achieve immediate independence from France. Touré was only 36 years old. France reacted harshly. Administrators departed, resources were removed, and relations with Paris quickly deteriorated. Yet across Africa, Guinea's decision became a symbol of courage and self-determination.
So this is what we see occurring in Burkina Faso, in Mali, and Niger. The leadership of these lions who are saying, hey, man, you know, we rather be free in poverty rather than rich in slavery, you know? And so this is what we see occurring. And as a result of such, we're seeing other African nations on the continent say, yeah, we agree. So there is this shift occurring. There is this reemergence of for independence, for sovereignty to be cut away from, or have France excised or cut away from these African countries. They no longer want anything to do with colonizers or being colonized. This is something France is resisting. As they did back then, they will do today. So these lions of the Sahel, they need to be mindful of what France is capable of. You know, yeah, this is 2026, and a lot of us would like to think that, that we're civilized. We're not barbarians, but they are barbarians. It's the same playbook at work. You know, they do what they need to do behind the scenes, and when that does not work, like we said, they send terrorists to destabilize these 3 countries in the Sahel. That isn't working. What's next? They then attempt to turn the Muslims against themselves. Ibrahim Traore is a Muslim. So they go behind closed doors and dark corners and whisper, oh, he's disrespecting Islam. You know, he's talking about secular law, not Sharia law. Oh, that's a slap in the face of Islam. All those Muslims, you know. That was the second attempt, I think, at trying to destabilize not just what he's established and what he's decided to put into place for Burkina Faso people, but also they're doing it because look, Here's the logic in it. Create chaos, create doubt, create speculation, create all those things needed to destabilize a power structure or to make the head of that power structure look ineffectual, all right? To make Ibrahim look as though he's incompetent. He can't do this. This is why France has been there so long, because they don't know what to do. However, that's not working either. So what's the next move? I mean, you know, really over 12 assassination attempts. All right, think about that. Over 12. You bring in terrorists from all over the world, Muslims, to destabilize a government that the people support, not let alone the whole world, you know. And then you try the divide and conquer tactic by using religion. What's next? There has to be a fourth strike or attempt at another strike at what they've established over there. But again, we tend to think that because things are evolving the way they are, and so and progressively so, all in a good way, it's all positive, that we don't think there's anything they can actually do. Even if they take Ibrahim Traore from us, what he started is already in effect. And not just at the higher echelon of that military government, but along the streets with the people. There's their problem. See, they just see Traore as the figure. They don't see the Burkina Faso people as the real participants, you know, the ones who are really vested in this change. That's where their problem lies. I don't know. You guys tell me what you think about this, you know, because we do understand that France is in a predicament, to say the least. You know, they are in such a way that we're pretty sure they're scrambling to figure out a way. And again, it's a mistake on their behalf to get rid of Ibrahim Traore. You know, that just it boggles the mind to think that they think that if they can do that, they can get back what's not theirs. They're so mistaken. Let us know what you think about this piece. Is France really worried? Has France lost the free resources they once received for decades? And is Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger better off today than they were when the French were there? Let us know what your thoughts are. Drop them in the comments. We will answer and respond to each and every one. Again, please like, share, follow, comment, and subscribe to The Art of Political Discourse. You guys have a great day.
You can murder a liberator, but you can't murder liberation. You can murder a revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't murder freedom.